I think in Germany there is general an environmental movement, very strong, also peace movement in the beginning of the 80s. So these social movements in Germany has a history, and it was always a question of to get a majority in the society for these questions, especially for nuclear. The second part of our success is we built up an independent scientific structure to criticize and to analyze the nuclear risks. In other countries there is no independent or very small independent scientist community who are working in the question of nuclear power. Generally the scientists and the nuclear economic are very linked. In Germany, up to the 80s, it was the same situation, but the incident in Chernobyl changed this. So since Chernobyl, we get a very independent scientific community who criticize the risks of nuclear power, and so we have a good information balance between the pro-nuclears and the anti-nuclears, and so I think the majority of the society could see both sides and decided objectively. Independent movement with independent scientists, with independent information, and independence of the nuclear power sector is the most important thing that society needs. Yes, nobody knows the cost of nuclear power, because if you have one incident like in Fukushima now, the costs are extremely high and nobody can pay that. So the costs are, I think, not the most important part. It's one of the parts, because nuclear power is very expensive. In the USA, there is since 20 years there is no new nuclear power plant built up because it's too expensive. Everywhere where you have an energy market, a free market, new nuclear power plants are too expensive, and you can only build them up with subsidies from the federal, from government, for example. It's the same in the US, it's the same in the United Kingdom, where nobody wants to build up new nuclear power plant because it's too expensive. Nuclear power plants are just today much more expensive than, for example, wind power. In Great Britain, you need 12 euro cent per kilowatt hour to get the investment back. 12 cent. Wind in Germany is 6 or 7 cent. So nuclear power is just in the part of solar energy. No, it's the same region. Coal will become expensive because of the CO2 emissions, and we have in the European Union we have the emission trade system. In the moment, the costs are very low. That must change. But nevertheless, in the midterm, coal will become expensive because of the CO2 emissions. So there is the third way, which will be the cheapest, and that are the renewables. Because renewables now, if you invest, are a little bit expensive, more expensive than if, for example, coal. But they will become cheaper and cheaper, and all other sources will become more expensive because of rising coal and rising CO2 prices, or rising technical prices like nuclear power plants, because nuclear is becoming more expensive since 40 years. It's the only technique in the world which is becoming still more expensive. Generally, technology is expensive in the start and becoming cheaper and cheaper, and nuclear is the other way. So we think in the midterm, just in the midterm, 2020 or this, the renewables are the cheapest way to supply a country with energy. We must learn of this accident because it was the first time that 3 or maybe 4 incidents come together, and there were 2 catastrophes which lead to this nuclear catastrophe. There was at first the tsunami, and there was second 2 low safety guides. Japanese, obviously, Japanese government did not realize the real hazards of the nuclear power plants and what could happen in their power plants. The report is just be published, and that was the main result. So they didn't realize the real hazards, and they didn't see that there may be a natural catastrophe like a tsunami which leads to the nuclear catastrophe. And so there are always things we didn't believe in, but they happened. And this is all in the question of nuclear power plants. This is very big risks that we can imagine. That must we learn of this Fukushima incident. Yes, I think the decision to prolong the use of nuclear power plants in Germany that happened in October 2010, half a year before Fukushima, was the result of a cooperation between the nuclear complex in Germany and the 2 parties that made the government here, the liberals and the conservatives. So they decided just some years ago, if there will be a conservative liberal government in Germany, they will prolong the use of nuclear energy. They won't build up new nuclear plants, but they prolong it. But Fukushima changed that. And it was a big surprise, not only for the Greens and German society, especially for the nuclear economy, because they believe years or 10 years, they believe the conservative liberal government will change the nuclear policy in Germany, and then they enforce with a lot of money, with a lot of pressure, this decision, and half a year later totally change everything, and they have to phase out still a little bit faster than the Greens decided 10 years ago. So there was a complete change, and I think now nuclear economy in Germany is made new strategies, because the strategy to set on nuclear power and their own strength didn't work. It didn't work. I think they are now thinking new ways to make a change, to lead also to renewables and other investments beside nuclear power plants. And you see it, the big German energy supplier won't build up any nuclear power plants, neither in Great Britain or somewhere else. So they refuse and change their own strategy more to renewables, and that's a very big success. So we have so that policy, society, and especially economy are now anti-nuclear, we can say, in Germany, and this is a very big success of, nevertheless, of the anti-nuclear movement. I think the picture of a bridge that leads us to a renewable age was a fake. It was the aim was to give nuclear power a little bit more time in Germany, up to 2040, 2050, because each nuclear plant was economic, very interesting. It was old, it was paid, but at least it but it's sold electricity every day, and every day you can make you have an income for each nuclear power plant for 1 or 2 million euros. So it was for the economy yes, it was wonderful to get so much money without investing any. But these times change, and then the bridge. I think the Greens always said we don't need a bridge. We're just in a transition process that started 2000 more or less with the Renewable Energy Act. We have the infrastructure, for example, grids, which are mainly decided on the European level because we are living in a European energy market. The complete 27 states are one market, but each nation in the EU can decide how to produce the energy. So the European Commission cannot say, okay, you have to use nuclear power, you have to use coal, you have to use renewable, something like this. Every country decides on its own how to realize this supply. So Germany could phase out, there's no legal question. But there are some other countries who are looking to Germany and said, oh no, what are they doing there? Some were very interested and said, okay, there's an interesting way, we will look if it will work, and others are criticized this way. But I think this development to the renewables is worldwide now the situation. Also, of course, in the European Union, and Germany is maybe one step faster than others, but I think the whole European Union will lead to renewables and will change in the long term from nuclear to renewables, because nuclear is not only risky, it's too expensive. We are convinced here in Germany, and all our scientists also, that to use geological formations is the best way, because you can. I think it's the future of geology is more predictable than the future of societies. So if we have to look forward in a future of 100, 200, 300,000 years, and if we have deposits that are which you can get open, I think the risks are enormous. That in future somebody do that and he has a weapon, it's not okay. So geological deposition in the deep is the right way. We discussed it some years ago, but scientific community here is already decided, and it's a part of our consensus that we want to get as soon as possible. I think, for example, the fusion is since 50 years. Scientists said, yes, we're coming nearer, and always in 50 years we will have the first results. They said it in the 1960s, they said it in 2000, 2010. I think there are two things or two facts that speaks against the fusion. It needs a complete nuclear infrastructure with reactors and also with new nuclear waste. This is not as much as in general as other reactors, but you have the new nuclear waste. So this is ecological and a question. I think it's not capable for the future. And the second is very, very expensive. You have to put a lot of money and this money we need now to enforce our questions which are now interesting: better renewable, better grids, and better communication systems and better markets. So we have our other things which are more important, and we shouldn't take so much money. For example, in the European Union, it's more or less more than 2 billion euros which are going into the fusion. This is too much. We don't have that money, and so we, the Greens, we want to stop fusion reactors, the build-up of fusion reactor, even scientific reactors. So at first we are now everywhere in the world, US, Great Britain, France, everywhere we have to invest in energy infrastructure, because that what we have today is old. The reactors are old, the grids are old, everything is very old, because the last 10, 20 years there was no big investment in the energy sector. So everywhere in the world we have to invest. And the question is not should we invest or not. We only have to ask where should we invest, because what is the cheapest way to the future. For many countries, it seems to be a very good way, because you can change from coal to nuclear power and then get your CO2 aims. Because nuclear power nearly has rather no CO2 emission, and it's the same energy supply system, because you have big units that must run all the day. One is coal-fired and other is nuclear-fired, so you can exchange that without to change the system. But you get more risks, or other risks, not the climate risks, the other risks. But it seemed to be very simple to do that. In Germany we say no, we have to change our complete system. We have to come from these big units down to decentral units, which are combined with very intelligent nets. This is maybe a little bit more complicated, but I think it will fit for the future. The role of nuclear, I'm pessimistic. I see a rising risk in nuclear risks, because the reactors getting older and older, and they are running and running and running. When they were built up, everybody thought, okay, 30, maybe 40 years, and then we close them down. In the meantime, we have reactors which are running for 50 years or more, and maybe they are running 60 years, because nobody wants to invest in new infrastructure, so they are becoming older. And therefore, it is possible that we will come to a new nuclear catastrophe in another part of the world in some years. We have now, every 10 years, a big incident. Maybe we come to still faster reaction, and this would be a hazard that we should diminish as soon as possible. So I think because of the risk of nuclear, we will, in a few years, in 10 years, 20 years ago, we will come to an end. I'm Ralf Schmidt-Pleschka. I'm advisor for energy policy here in the Green Club in Parliament. So I'm not a member of the Parliament, but working in the backside to inform and to advise politicians and the Green Party, of course, in question of energy policy.